I worked with a gal who had brain cancer. And so as you can imagine, that makes writing super challenging because you start losing your ability to think and to process and to remember and all of that as she was going through that. The good news is we got the rough draft done and the bulk of her work done before she was really ill. And then as we were working through some of the things and I had some questions, she couldn't remember anymore. She wasn't, but her husband was able to come alongside and kind of be the go-between to help figure those things out. And she was able to actually hold a copy of the book in her hands before she passed away.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Nikki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. Welcome, and Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. This is so fun. I'm glad we have connected and we're able to talk about this really important subject today. I'm looking forward to it.
And it is important. As a writer, writing your legacy has such a deep impact for those you leave behind. And so that's why I wanted to reach out to you, and thank you for accepting the invite. So talk a little bit for our audience, who you are and what was it about this topic that got you interested in joining us today?
Well, I'm Jennifer Crosswhite. I am the owner and CEO of Tandem Services, Inc. And we support authors in getting their message out through book coaching, through editing, and even through some support through the publishing process, depending on your goals. And I think one of the things that is so important about this topic, as you get older and you start losing family members, you realize once they're gone, you can't ask them any more questions. And so I lost my grandmother a few years ago and my dad a year and a half ago. And one of the things that came up was, as we're going through like family pictures and things, we're like, well, who are these people in this picture? Well, you know what? We're never going to know because now there's no one around to ask anymore. And so
those lost,
yes,
I mean, they're really lost memories.
They're completely gone.
Not just the stories,
yes.
Right?
And my grandmother had always said that she wanted to write her memoirs. And so when my aunt and uncle were going through her papers, and I said, well, where are grandma's memoirs? And they're like, do you mean the one page that she wrote? She never got into it. And it was so sad because there were things I had wanted to ask her. And I'm sure things that all of us, I mean, she was 99 when she died. So she had lived through a lot. But, what was it like when she was a young girl? What was it like living through World War II? What was it like? Just little stories. I mean, it didn't have to be this big biography, just the stories of what her everyday life was like, or what were some of the special moments or special memories. And having those things to pass on to your family, that is a huge treasure. That is something that's even more valuable than like the antiques or the family heirlooms. I mean, those all have memories too, right? But it's the memories that are so important. And so being able to just record those for your family can be a great, great legacy to leave that only you can leave to them.
Because it's not, a crystal vase, right, as beautiful as it is, you don't know the story behind it.
Right.
And then to be able to have those written words, what a gift.
It truly is. Yes, it truly is an amazing gift to leave your family.
And a challenge for some as well, right? I mean, For me, writing doesn't come naturally to me. I can name a few elementary school, maybe more junior high English teachers that did not leave a good impression for me. And so writer's block, anxiety around writing, these are kind of things that I speak well enough, but to be able then to put it down on paper, what are some suggestions, for you that you're working with your clients just to get those words on paper?
Yeah, well, and I think this is a real problem, and you have hit the nail on the head. Many people feel like, well, I'm not a writer and I don't know where the commas go, or I'm not a good speller or any of that stuff. And honestly, none of that matters. Think of it as if I was just going to sit down and have a conversation with a family member or a good friend over a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever your caffeine of choice is. What would you tell them? And this is the really cool thing. We have all this wonderful technology now. So it doesn't actually have to be in writing. you could just record it. We all have phones that have the capacity just to do recordings, right? It could be a video or it could just be a voice memo. So just being able to even ask some questions. If you're not the person, if you want to interview an older member of your family, you can do that. You can just get your phone out and start asking them questions. I had the lovely advantage of talking to my grandmother several years before she died. And normally, whenever I saw her, all the family was around and there was a lot of people. But I had this one time where it was just the two of us. And her family came over through Ellis Island. They came over from England. She was the only one born in the U.S. And I had researched the Census Bureau records and gotten the actual handwritten records of when they had come through and some of the early census records from when she was a young girl. And I was showing her all of these things. And she started telling me stories about when she was a young girl and some of the things that happened. And we got on Google Earth and we looked up she remembered her old address. And
Amazing.
We're looking on Google Earth, and the street view. And she goes, oh, that house, that's not the house I grew up in. They clearly had redone it. But she recognized the tree. There was this giant tree. She goes, I used to climb that tree. And so we learned all these wonderful stories. I learned things about her that my dad didn't even know, that she had never bothered to tell her son, but she was able to share with me. And those things were just amazing treasures to be able to have. So as the family writer, I was able to sort of write those things up and share them with my family. But you can easily just record. You can use, the transcription software that's out there now if you want to do that. There's so many great ways. And honestly, this is not a school essay. It doesn't have to have a topic sentence and 3 supporting paragraphs. It doesn't have to be anything other than just a story. And I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I have to tell my whole life from the beginning all the way to the present day, and it feels so overwhelming. But I suggest people just start with stories. Tell me about your first day of school. Tell me about your favorite teacher. Tell me about things that were really important to you, because that's really what we care about. We know their birthday. We can find out where they were born. That may or may not really be that important. What's more important is their emotions, the experiences that they went through, the lessons that they learned. Those are the questions you can ask people in your family or that you can write about yourself. Those are the things that you want to pass on. And as I talk to, as we're getting older, my friends who have lost different family members, the things that mattered the most to us from our family members were those cards, those letters, those things that they kept that were like their guiding light in life. This is my principles that I want to live by. These are the things that are most important to me. Those are the kinds of things you want to pass on as a legacy. And so getting to the heart of those stories and those principles and how you became the person that you are, that all just comes out through story. So I recommend keep it short and sweet. Don't feel like you've got to write, 100 pages. 3 to 5 pages sometimes can be fantastic for a certain story. And then you can just add the stories together as you wish and not worry about it becoming this. It does not have to be this big, massive thing. It can just be something that has a lot of memories for you and your family members.
That manuscript, right? It doesn't need to be a manuscript.
It does not. Right? And a lot of people think, well, I didn't do anything super exciting. I never did these huge accomplishments or whatever. And honestly, that's not the thing your family members care about. They care about the day-to-day stuff, like with my grandma, right? Living to be 99. I mean, if you think about, she started out she was telling me she and her niece would take the streetcar because where they live, there were streetcars, right? Well, there's no streetcars around where I live anymore, but that's what they did. They hopped on a streetcar if they wanted to go somewhere. And, but here she is in her 90s. She's got an iPhone. So you think about the amount of technology, right? She's seen in her lifetime. And those are the kind of fun things that we want to talk about. I mean, I'm Gen X and I share with my kids all the time. We had a dial phone growing up and we had a 9 and an 8 in our phone number. So it took a long time to dial those numbers. Those are the kind of funny things that you want to share, It makes it fun and interesting.
It's the power of storytelling.
It is.
And sometimes the greatest stories are in the details,
Yes.
right? It is the details of ordinary lives and how you felt about walking down a street you've walked down so many times, but that one time you walked down it, a turtle in the middle of the
Right.
sidewalk, and just your experience with that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We don't know what the extraordinary comes out of the ordinary.
Yeah. Very true.
And then you talked about the challenges. So, and just to step into the digital realm of it, right? So as a writer, what are your feelings about people now documenting and writing their lives on these digital platforms like a Facebook and Instagram? And how do they translate what they're writing and experiencing on the social media platforms and bringing it back to, more of I want to say a book? I mean, how do you make that transition?
Yeah, those are some really, really good points. Also, because you don't own Facebook or Instagram, right? So it's kind of rented land. So anything you put on there could disappear. It's not a permanent solution, but it is a good resource. I have actually gone through when it brings up like on Facebook your memories of things that have happened and little things that I had said about my kids, or my kids, had little funny things, that your kids say when they're growing up. I started copying those into a notes document on my computer, so I could keep track of those kinds of things so they don't just disappear. And so I would say it's a great resource, especially if you want to sit down with an older family member or for yourself to go through and say, hey, what have I put on there? What are some of those memories that I want to capture and put them someplace a little more concrete or more permanent that I might have access to? I think that's a really wise thing. And then of course, once someone dies, you can lose access to that if you haven't made arrangements to have the legacy access to that. And so, I certainly recommend to everyone take the steps to make sure that someone has legacy access to your social media accounts.
Oh, that's like a whole nother conversation.
It's a whole other thing.
It is a whole nother show.
Yes.
Right. Safeguarding your digital legacy.
Yeah.
But you're bringing up a good point though, right? Is that just because it's on one platform doesn't mean you have control of the story.
Right.
Right. And then here's the other piece, right? If someone dies and all their story is on, let's say, Facebook, for example, and they did not set up their legacy, right? It's going to be really hard to either control or maintain sovereignty of that story.
Yes.
So best practices, right? Do you really recommend that people, here's another piece. You said put it in a file, right? Do you prescribe digital versus physical?
Right.
What's your...
I probably is personal preference. Now, as a writer, and every writer that I know has lost a manuscript. And once you lose a manuscript or have something deleted, you get obsessed with making sure. So I have lots of redundancy. I have cloud backup on my computer. I also have a physical hard drive on my external hard drive on my computer. I always buy as much memory as I can. And so I think a combination of, always have it two places. So if you use Google Docs, which is a cloud-based thing, which is great because a lot of people can have access to it.
But you don't own it.
But you don't own it, right? So also download it regularly to your actual physical computer so you have a copy of it. So those are just some things to think about. One of the things that's, and I personally don't like Google Docs. I write everything still in Microsoft Word, or I actually use a program called Scrivener, which is like a digital binder. And you can write in there, but you could also put in photos, you can put in websites and things like that. So if you are really going to get into this kind of thing and you want to add photos and get it a little more advanced, something like Scrivener is a really good option for kind of keeping those things together. But I think one of the cool things, of the digital world is that now anyone who wants can put their book up, either through Amazon or Ingram Spark, and you can start with a small version. You can change it, you can upload it, you can download it, you can, when they print it for you, you're only paying for the copies of the prints that you order. You're not having to do a small print run or anything like that.
You're bringing up a really great point. Sorry for interrupting,
but
you're bringing up a great point, which is, so say, I've been diagnosed with, stage 4 cancer, and I know that my life is going to be shortened while I'm going through treatment. I really want to document for my young children my wishes for them.
Sure.
So I feel you've just mentioned some tools. So step 1 would be what? So I should, if I know I want to write a book and I want to write a book for those I leave behind, step 1 would be, you mentioned a couple of platforms.
Yeah. So I would either, write it in Microsoft Word or Pages or whatever you're comfortable with on your computer, or dictate into it. I mean, there's so many ways now. Almost all of the apps and everything takes dictation. So if you, and don't worry about the spelling or any of that you can throw that into Grammarly, or even ChatGPT will do kind of a good job of cleaning things up, for you. So don't stress about that part. The most important part is to get your story down. So focus on that. And then once it's there, and it's, if you want to bring somebody in, like an editor, it depends on what your goals are, whether it's just a friend or if you actually want to hire an editor, it depends on what you want to do with it. But once it's in some sort of manuscript form, which you can hire people to do for you, choosing, are you going to include photos or not, depending on how complex or how simple you want to make this. But it's not terribly difficult to upload something to Amazon. I mean, it's really not. It doesn't cost you anything. It's perfectly free. And then it can be available as an ebook for people, but most people are going to want a physical copy. But it's not bad to have an ebook as something that you keep downloaded, as an additional file. But, you just order author copies. You don't even have to put it up for sale necessarily. You can just order author copies, and then, hey, I have 20 people in my family, I want to give them this book. You just do it through that. And then you're not having to take it to a printer and pay for printing costs and set up all that stuff, which is what we had to do in the past. But now we don't have to do that. We can do, and then if you're like, hey, I really enjoyed that process, I want to do round 2, or I want to add to it, it's very easy to continue to either modify the existing files or upload new files. It is a real simple process.
Whole new world.
People should take advantage of it.
Oh, well, let's just step into that, right? So a lot of people might not be aware that they can, I guess the term we're using is self-publishing, right? So talk a little bit about the difference between, going to a literary agent, right, versus self-publishing, and when, or pay, right? And then there's self-publishing through Amazon, which is like a DIY, versus going to, you're just going to have to educate me on the different paths.
Yeah.
So I have a story. I've completed my book. I feel really good about it. I've been few accolades and my writing is actually pretty good. Now I want to publish. Yeah. What are the opportunities and the different choices I can make?
Yeah. So a couple things. I mean, really, unless you're a famous person, no big name publishing house or agent is going to be interested in your story. Sadly, Memoir is one of the hardest things to sell. Sometimes it sells really, really good if it hits on a certain thing. But for most of us, 95, maybe more percentage of us, no big publishing house is going to be that interested in our story. It's mostly going to be for friends and family, right? I think the big thing to decide ahead of time is, what is your budget? How much help do you want to hire out? What do you want the end project to look like? So if it's important to you that it's very beautiful, that it has a beautiful cover, that it's well designed on the inside, those kinds of things, then you'll probably want to hire some help for that. You can contact people like me, or there is a marketplace called Readsy.com, and they have all vetted professionals on there that can help you with everything from editing to formatting to cover design to all those places. There are things called hybrid, which is kind of a strange misnomer, and I say these waters get a bit murky. There are some lovely hybrid companies where you keep all of the rights, you own everything, and they will literally help you through every piece of this step, and you can buy various packages for them. They tend to be more expensive than if you were to just go like through Readsy or to reach out to like me or somebody like me, just because if you imagine, they have overhead and things that they need to cover. There are also some scam artists in that field as well. So I always tell people, if you're going to be in those waters, and there's, like I said, there's certainly some appropriate ones out there, please contact me so I can give you some advice on whether or not this is an appropriate use of your funds for what you're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes people promise the moon and then they find out that they get a terrible manuscript. It doesn't look anything like what they wanted. And they paid a lot of money for it and they're very unhappy. Sadly, I get a lot of clients like that. They're like, I already spent all this money and I didn't end up with anything for it. And so that always hurts my heart. I don't want people to go through that. So it's just hard because there's no actual terms or rankings, or there's some, websites that people say, oh, be aware of this people. They're very bad, but it's an industry that, anybody can call themselves anything in it. Right. So it's a little bit of a challenge. So, depending on what your goal is, how you want it to look, how you want it to, what your budget is, all of that. I think those are really important things to think about. If this is sort of your end all be all finished work, everything you want to say about your life with photos and you want it to be very beautiful and all that, you definitely going to want someone to help you. If you just want to do something that's kind of a fun Christmas gift, that's like fun sayings from grandma, and here's grandma's favorite recipes, and here's some, that most people could probably do something like that themselves. And, it doesn't have to be very big. It could be just really kind of fun, and you can print it up and give them out as Christmas gifts. So there's a wide variety of things that you can do. And that's the thing. I think that for most people, I would say just do something. So whatever you do, I think it's important that you do something, at least start to get the ideas down, the stories down, and start to gather those things. And don't worry about having to be this huge project. Just start small, get your feet wet. If you really enjoy it, then you can make it something bigger. But so many times we try to, I'm going to have this big thing, and then we never get around to it. So do something. That would be my advice right there.
Awesome. Well, listen, a lot of us business owners, right? We've built this legacy, this business of ours, and yet we might get a diagnosis or something might happen to us. So talk to me more about how we can continue our legacy as we created a business and move it through and keep it going through a book. What's your experience there?
Yeah. So business owners, you have something that's a little bit different, right? Because you have all of this knowledge and this wisdom that you have in your business that you pass on to your clients as you work with them. And so the cool thing about a book is that it lives on after you. And so with the copyright protections that we have in the US, and they're pretty consistent worldwide, it's your life plus 70 years. So a book for a business owner is a great way to make sure that your legacy, your thought process, some of the cool things that you have done with your business, all of that can live on after you've gone. And so one of the things that's important for business owners to begin thinking about is what kinds of things would you want to put in a book? If a book does well, it could be a stream of income for your heirs after you have gone. If it is something that contributes to your business, it can be something that is either an entryway for another part of your business or something that is another stream of income. And so I think for business owners, you really should seriously look at how could a book impact your business. Certainly right now, while you're alive, it's a great way to reach more people than you could ever reach just directly with your business. But as something that can live on after your business, it's a great piece to think about. And I think so many of us who perhaps had entrepreneurs in our family would have loved to have some of, Grandpa Joe's wisdom about his construction business, or even some funny stories, right, about that. Or what was it like back then being a business owner back in those days? What are some of the challenges? And then what are some of the things that are still the same, right? There are some things that are still the same no matter what, because people are just still people. So as a business owner, I think you have a little bit of a different challenge. But I think one you should seriously consider about how that can really be not only an impact now for your business, but also the kind of legacy that you can leave for your family and for your clients and for people that you don't even know yet.
Writing is not just about the stories, but it is passing on the knowledge.
Yes.
In order to create that legacy. So some of the challenge that you see out there, like having worked with some of the non-professional authors, right? So from a business professional, as a consultant, right? What are some of the challenge you would be able to help me with? Like if I'm ready to write my book,
Sure.
How would we work together?
Yeah. So I would say probably the biggest challenge everybody has is time, right? And overwhelm, because a book is a big project, right? It can seem like a big project. I don't know where to start. I don't do this every day. What do I do? And so a huge part of my business is coaching authors. Hey, let's get together. Let's talk about what do you want to accomplish? Let's set a plan for you. Let's set up some reasonable goals. Let's figure out how long we want to take to get there. And then we'll work together till we achieve those goals. And being able to have someone come alongside you, I liken it to like going to the gym, right? You can walk into the gym if you haven't been working out, and there's all these machines everywhere. And, you can ask the people at the gym and they'll show you how the machine works. But is that the machine you're supposed to be using? Like, someone needs to, like, if you hire a personal trainer, they would come in and say, well, what do you want to accomplish? They would look at your body and the things that you're trying to do. And, I want upper body strength. Okay, great. Well, then you need to do this machine this way, this much time. And over time, we're going to work on that till you hit your goals, right? So it's kind of a nice analogy, because most people find that they make much bigger progress on their exercise goals if they have a trainer with them who will help them along the way. And also then there's this human thing about it's easier when you're doing it with somebody and you're not trying to figure it out by yourself. It's easier when you have someone who's saying, hey, we've got a meeting by Friday, and so you're making time for it. Because like with anything, if you don't put a deadline on it or some dates on it, it just kind of drifts out forever and ever, and you never actually get around to doing it. So having a coach come alongside you and say, okay, here's what your goals are for this book. Let's say, okay, well, we can accomplish that in this amount of time. And then we're going to set up some regular benchmarks for that. We're going to come up with a plan. It makes it so much easier, because every time you're done with a coaching session, you know what you have to do between now and next time. You're not wandering going, I don't know what I should talk about. I have no idea. You've got someone to help you along that way. And so I find particularly with business owners, so this is true for probably almost everybody, but business owners, you're always wearing so many hats and you've got so many things going on that it really feels like this is just one more thing. So business owners really often benefit from having a coach to say, okay, we're going to get this done. Your book's going to be written in 6 months. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's what's going to be structured. And then you've got it. You can run with it after that.
And I just think, to me, 6 months, some people don't have 6 months.
Right.
And they really want to get that out there. Have you ever worked with someone who, has received a terminal diagnosis? And how can you support them through that end of life process?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I worked with a gal who had brain cancer. And so as you can imagine, that makes writing super challenging, because you start losing your ability to think and to process and to remember and all of that as she was going through that. The good news is we got the rough draft done and the bulk of her work done before she was really ill. And then as we were working through some of the things and I had some questions, she couldn't remember anymore. She wasn't, but her husband was able to come alongside and kind of be the go-between to help figure those things out. And she was able to actually hold a copy of the book in her hands before she passed away. And that was super meaningful.
Good. So, because how many people don't get to see that final product? So to be able to, and it sounds like the book isn't just for her, right? It is for those she's leaving behind.
It really was.
So for them-
and she had a wonderful sense of humor that really came out through the stories. And of course, whenever people have any sort of brain injury or illness, the personality changes, right? And so she was losing some of that as she was going through her disease. And so for her family to be able to remember, I remember how funny she was. I remember these silly things that happened to her. I remember these crazy situations she got herself into. They had that book to be able to celebrate her life over and over again and remember her when she was still healthy and who she really was. And so it really was one of the best gifts she could have left for her family.
How long did it take from the time she contacted you to the time? Is it the manuscript? Is that the terminology?
Well, yeah, I would say it was about 9 months, probably, if I remember correctly, from the beginning to holding the book in her hands. So that's the nice thing.
Yeah,
I think the actual production part, she went with a company that just did the production of the interior and the cover and everything for her. And I worked with them and we got it all done.
Talk a little bit about a memoir versus, because maybe somebody who is at end of life, they want to write a book, but maybe not a memoir. Maybe there's this fictional story in there. So talk a little bit about what that might be like, that process.
So I love fiction because I have written I can't remember. I'll have to separate them. I think I'm on book 15 or 16 of the novels that I've written. I'm working on one right now.
What genre?
Yes.
What genre do you write in?
I write romantic suspense for the most part. I do have some historical romances that I've written because I love history, but I do tend to write historical romance, which is fun. But I work with authors from every genre. And so I tell people it's weird. I'm really split 50-50 between the nonfiction folks and the fiction folks, and it never seems to really change. But I have a whole fiction novel writing course. And so people can do that if they want to kind of do a DIY thing. They can go through the course themselves. Of course, I have coaching for fiction clients as well, and also editing. So if you've written it and you want some advice, you want an evaluation, where are we? What do we need to do? We can help you with that and make sure that you're on the right track. But it's really fun writing a book. I mean, there's just, especially with fiction, you can make the world the way you want it to be, and you can have all these, crazy ideas that have been in your head. You can get those out. For a lot of people, writing a novel is a bucket list item. It's something they've wanted to do for a long time. And, I don't know where to begin, or I don't have enough time, or any of that kind of stuff. It's really the same kind of principles. Making the time, having someone help you execute the plan. Fiction, of course, has a lot more layers to it than nonfiction, but it is so much fun to write, and people usually get a big kick out of it. And so I encourage people, if you've ever thought about it, do it. It's fun, and you will there's something cool about having that book with your name on it, or if you want to use a pseudonym, you can do that too. But it's just a really fun thing that same copyright applies to fiction as well. So your books can live on for a lot longer than you will. And that's a really cool thing.
And I want to say that it doesn't necessarily, what it's coming to my mind is that it doesn't necessarily need to be a story. I'm thinking of, an aunt who just loved writing poetry her whole life and has a box full of stories. And so is that it possible to scan them? And then
you can, or just, it would depend on what you want to do. Sometimes people want the actual image of someone's handwriting, right? So you would treat it like a photo. As I am, as we're discovering, the younger generations don't read handwriting. So you might have to put a typeset version next to it. So but that's not
something to think about, right? I mean, it's just their eyes are not trained to be able to see, what script, cursive writing looks like.
It's true. My kids will say that if I ever write out a grocery list, I have to make sure I print it. They're like, then they say, could you just text it to me? Yeah.
We're not showing our age. We're not showing our age.
It's kind of funny. But yes, I think those are lovely. I mean, recipes, right? Family recipes. You could do a picture of the handwritten recipe card and maybe a picture of the finished product. But, think about all those family memories around meals. So you could have the recipe and then maybe a story around it, a memory or something like that. There's so many lovely creative ways you can deal with that I think it would be a shame to let a lot of that go without recording it for other generations, because pretty quickly those stories start getting lost and start, they don't always, the things that, my grandparents told my dad and then my dad told me, right, as they're getting filtered down, and then I tell my kids, we've lost some of that already just because that's just the nature of how those things happen. So being able to write that stuff down and have it is just, it's something that you can't really put a price tag on.
I just want to touch on one more topic because it's burning in my head, which is, I do have something notable. And so in order to promote it or sell it, right, whether it's, because there's some people that might be financially struggling to pay the funeral costs or the medical bills that are now coming in after the person dies, and that they were able to capture something. So from a marketplace standpoint, talk a little bit about, I mean, we mentioned Amazon. I'm not that familiar with the self-posting on Amazon, and maybe you have some other platforms for self-publishing.
Amazon, 80% of books are bought on Amazon. So I tell most people you got to start there for the most part, unless you have some sort of, moral or ethical issue with Amazon, which there are people that do, and that's understandable. I generally recommend Amazon. However, you can self-publish to Barnes & Noble, to Apple Books. Kobo is it's a Canadian company, but they reach a lot of places. There is an aggregator called Draft to Digital that I use. And what they do is you just upload it once to them, and then they send it out, and they also send it to libraries and all sorts of other places where you can't necessarily upload your work directly. Now, they take a 10% cut, but I find that very, very reasonable for all the work that they do. Personally, I have my books on Amazon. I have them on Draft to Digital, so they can go all sorts of places and be in libraries. And then I also have a Shopify store where people can buy the books directly from me. That's kind of an advanced strategy. Not everybody has to do that, and probably not everybody should, because it can be time consuming. But I think for most people, being on Amazon is a great place to go, because you can just give someone the Amazon link and they can find your book. And most of the techniques that you use to make your book searchable and findable on Amazon, if that's what you're trying to do and you want to do, the same kind of algorithm tweaks and keywords and that kind of stuff, that's applicable to all storefronts for the most part.
And be able to monetize. And
yes.
Price point. So how does the pricing work when you're selling a book?
A lot of it can be, page count is sort of the rule of thumb for everything in publishing. Obviously something that's, or word count, is the other thing. So if you're doing like a small, less than 100-page book, that's going to be much cheaper than something that's like 400 pages, right? Just the cost of everything takes more time the bigger the book is. I tell people go on Amazon and search, and then also do this at Barnes & Noble too, and Apple Books. They all have a little bit different audiences, but search as if you were searching for your book. What would you look for? What kind of things would you type into the search category, right? And see what comes up. What kinds of books are coming up? What kind of titles? What kind of keywords? What kind of price points? Look at all that, because that's your competition. If your book is up there, people are going to be typing those same things in. And that should give you a sense of what you can charge for it, what it should look like, what the size should be. Again, this is if you're considering it from a more marketable standpoint. Those are all things to think about, what is actually out there in the market that you need to be aware of. But I tell people, put yourself kind of in the middle of the market. Better, don't be too high, don't be too low. Again, a lot of people say, well, I want my book to go lots of places, so I'm only going to charge 99 cents for it. Except that nobody will take your book seriously if it's only 99 cents. I mean, yes, there's times to put that on sale and to do a special and all that. But if it's just regularly priced at 99 cents, people will go, well, that probably can't be worth anything. Why would they only charge 99 cents for it, right? So you need to be in the middle of what your market is paying for those kinds of books. Just be right in the middle of it.
Because with social media, even knowing you're not a famous person, but if you have a social media presence, right, and you have a large following, right? I mean, if I look at my Facebook account, my personal Facebook account, I have over 600 connections.
Right.
Well, 600 connections, if I have an intriguing story, whether it's, Barnes & Noble publishable or not, right, the idea is that I'm still reaching people who care about me.
Absolutely.
Or have a connection with me.
Absolutely.
Right?
And being able to do that either through social media, through just emailing people. Hey, I got a new book coming out. Man, people are super happy that you have a book. They are so excited to support you, and they would love to do that. And so being able to reach people directly like that it's really the first stage of any marketing platform, is to reach the people around you. And then hopefully they'll get excited about it and they share with their friends, and you get that kind of ripple effect. Because, let's face it, there's 80 million books on Amazon. It's hard to get found.
So this has been amazing. Thank you so much. And just like lasting words, like encouraging words, right? Because part of what we do at My Final Playbook, which is the app that we educate people on end of life planning, right? Legal, financial, physical, and digital. And this piece really does come into that legacy digital aspect. So words of wisdom, what can we do to empower people to just take the moment and write down what your thoughts are?
Yes. And I would say that's it. Just take a step, maybe 10, 15 minutes a day, just to start writing down ideas. Even if you don't fully flesh them out, don't worry about it. Do not put the pressure on yourself. Just start writing notes. Just start writing thoughts. Just let those memories start percolating. Maybe look at old photo albums, right? To sort of, remember those, remember those crazy styles we wore back in the 70s, right? My kids laugh. Mom, really? You wore your hair like that? So just some of those fun things that you can remember. My dad told me a story that I didn't know. When my grandma died, she left me her diamond earrings. And I thought, oh, that's really sweet. My dad goes, oh, I know why she left those to you. Because she and your mom went behind my back and got your ears pierced.
It's like an inside joke.
It was a total, and I remembered getting my ears pierced, but I didn't remember that it was this like collusion between my mom and my grandma. And so that was like one last sort of joke that my grandma had on my dad, even after she had passed. Well, that's a fun story. I'm totally going to write that down because I would never have known that, right? And my kids wouldn't have known it. So as you start thinking about those things, just write them down or make a voice memo or do whatever you need to do to just start getting some of those memories down. What you decide to do with that later, that doesn't have to be decided right away. And I would say for your audience, you guys can reach out to me. I have a special gift for you guys. If you reach out to me at Tandem Services Inc., and Inc. is INK, .com/legacy. You can get an ebook that gets you started on some of this, and then you can also get a 30-minute call with me where we can kind of talk over what some of your goals might be, and would love to talk to you guys about what you want to do, what your next steps are, and how to get started on that so you can leave a written legacy for your family.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining today, and we are looking forward to finding you on LinkedIn and on your guys.
Yes, thank you so much. I've loved being here. Love talking about helping people put down their legacy in words.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.